All right, last call for any of the public comment slips. If anyone else would like to make public comment, just make sure you fill out the yellow slip. All right, I would like to call the meeting to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. To lead us. Roll call, please.
Kristen Hambenzi,
Here.
Jennifer Ray,
Here.
Jason Zadunik,
Wait.
And yet here.
Jennifer Cliff,
Here.
Cheryl Maddox Smith,
Here.
Cassidy Thomas, Eric Smith,
Here.
And I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Support.
Okay, motion made by Mrs. Cliff, support by Ms. Ray. All those in favor? Aye. Moving on to the superintendent's report, Mr. Sedgwick.
Thank you, President Camdenzi. And I'd like to start off by passing over to Mr. Lampman for a budget amendment. I think he's going to use the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Sedgwick. I did promise Mr. Sedgwick I'd try to keep it under an hour. So here we go. So I'm here this evening to present the second budget amendment of the 24-25 fiscal year. So to give you a little historical perspective, the March budget amendment historically was used for kind of just a little bit of a cleanup of the budget before coming into year end. Over 80% of the staffing or budget expenditures are staffing costs, salaries and benefits. And we took a good hard look at those with the December amendment, so we didn't look at those with this March amendment. We're looking at non-staff, non-benefit items. In the past, for those of you that were on the board during the COVID years, one of the challenges we had was, and it was a good challenge, was we were receiving grants all throughout the year that made us continually readdress our staffing plan as we were moving people to various grants throughout the year. So that didn't happen this year, so we're trying to go back to a little bit of normalcy. Hence why we didn't look at salaries and benefits with this amendment. Having said that, it's like 5 minutes already. Starting with the general fund is comprised of several different funds. We've got our general operations, our grant fund, Kaufman, planetarium, Father Marquette services that we provide, retirement terminal leave, contingency, athletics, and the special revenue for student activity funds. All rolls into what we call the general fund. So, one of the things that we're adjusting is our property taxes. We're looking at an increase of about $28,000. That's adjusting for our City of Marquette property taxes that came in. We collect the city taxes in the summer, the townships in the winter. So we're just adjusting to our actual tax revenue for collections from City of Marquette. March, April is generally when we see our tax settlement come from the county. So for the final amendment, we'll have our tax settlement from the county and we'll adjust to our actual taxes across the board, including the townships at that time. The most significant change to the general fund in this amendment is our state aid revenue. It's by and far the largest share of the revenue in the general fund. We take in between 30, 32 million a year in state aid revenue. So we based the December amendment off our November state aid report. And That report had some categoricals that didn't show up at that time. It also had some reductions in some of our normal income. So currently our foundation allowance per pupil is at $9,608. We did not see an increase this year. What they did instead was they gave us a one-time MIPSER's cost offset, and that's kind of in the long paragraph in bullet point 2. So they gave us the equivalent of what would be a per pupil increase of $369. But what they did was they reduced our MIPSER's normal cost offset by about $627,000, and that was in November. Well, now here we are in March, looking at our February state aid report, and they've restored some of that. So we're looking at an increase of about $325,000 to our MIPSER's normal cost offset. So that was a pleasant surprise to see. We also saw an increase to our 51C special ed money. That is largely due to the fact that between fiscal year 22-23 and 23-24, we saw about $1 million increase in our special ed expenditures. So annually, we file a cost report with the state of Michigan detailing our allowable special ed expenditures. And we saw $1 million increase. So part of that was returned back to us through our state aid. So we were giving an increase for fiscal year 24-25 of $286,360. And they also gave us a prior period adjustment in our state aid, giving us an additional $286,360 for last year, based off of what we reported in special ed expenditures. And then also our 22B discretionary funding increased $252,000 over where they originally allocated those dollars in December. And that's partially because our FTE increased from 3,202 to 3,216. So we saw an increase in our FTEs. So looking at the big picture, our December amendment, we were at revenues of $47,691,000. We're currently proposing in March $48,882,000. So overall, that's an increase of $1,191,000. And again, largely due to the additional allocations on our state aid. And this is just graphically showing you in black what was adopted back in December, in blue what the current proposed adoption is, and it just lays out for you graphically. You can see by far the state revenue is our largest revenue source in the general fund, followed by local dollars, our property taxes, and then less significantly is our federal awards. So looking at expenditures, overall we're proposing a 0.6% increase into our expenditures. So when you're looking at a $48 million budget, that's pretty nominal. These increases are due to some additional expenditures that we had in athletics travel, some additional instructional staff training, and then some purchases for software license and various program supplies, as well as for our CTE middle college program. So overall, back in December, we were at $48,176,000. In March, we're proposing $48,484,000. So that's an overall increase of $307,000. Again, pretty nominal, less than 1%. We're looking at 0.6%. So relatively small change in the grand scheme of things. Again, here it is graphically. You can see in black what was adopted back in December, in blue what is being proposed. And you can see our largest expense is our staffing costs, salaries, and benefits, which we'll revisit with our final amendment in June. So looking at the general fund overall, we started the year with a fund balance of $18,305,000. We're proposing with this amendment revenues of $48,882,000, expenses of $48,484,000, resulting in a net income of $398,000, and an overall ending fund balance of $18,704,000. do have our fund balance broken down into various categories as well. 365,000 is non-spendable. Those are things like prepaid insurance that are non-cash items. We have money set aside for contingency, so we reserve 10% of fund balance currently for contingency items. We have almost 2.2 million in assigned fund balance. 1,300,000 of that is reserved for MTSS implementation, and then the remainder is for a set aside for future school bus purchasing, leaving 11,309,000 in unassigned fund balance available for use. And by the way, feel free to stop me at any point with questions, because I do have an hour to fill. So moving on to the food service fund. Food service, we took an in-depth look at food service with the December amendment, so we're not really proposing any changes at this point. We'll kind of do our final review with the final budget in June. So right now, we're not proposing any changes to revenue, so we're still at $2,044,000 in revenue for the school lunch fund. Expenses, we left it pretty much the same. The only thing that we're changing in the school lunch fund is we're increasing our administrative indirect allocation from $95,000 to $105,000. And that's just based off a formula of what we're allowed to charge for administrative costs to the school lunch fund. So we're increasing that transfer to the general fund by $10,000. So overall, we started the year in the school lunch fund at $746,000. We're adding revenues of $2,044,000, expenditures of $2,008,000, resulting in a net income of $36,215 and an ending fund balance overall of $782,544. Moving on, looking at the proposed amendment for the private purpose trust fund, we're not proposing anything at this time. This basically funds scholarships, which are paid out in May. So we'll revisit this fund with our final amendment after we've made those scholarship payments. Again, we started the year at $307,000 in the trust fund, and we're anticipating $309,000, but we'll course correct once we make those scholarship payments. Moving on, we have the debt retirement fund, capital projects fund, sinking fund. We're not proposing a whole lot with the debt service fund. This is basically collecting tax revenue to pay the 2016 bond. And so it's basically an in and out. We collect the tax revenue, we pay the bond, the next bond payment comes up in May. So after we make the bond payment, we'll do final adjustments for the year-end budget. But based off actual taxes that came in, we're increasing the revenue line by $4,215. So we started the year with a fund balance in the debt service fund of $186,000. We're adding revenues of $592,000, expenses of $657,000, resulting in a net loss of $64,911, and an ending fund balance of $121,188. The sinking fund. So the sinking fund does have its own funding source. There's a millage, about 0.94 mils that's assessed for generating revenue to do projects within the district. As you can see right now, we're proposing revenues of $1,332,000. That's up about $12,000. Again, that's just an adjustment in property tax revenue. As far as expenditures go, we were at $1,755,000. We're increasing that about $114,000, and that was for some activity that occurred this year. Closeout. We had some boiler work done at Bothwell Middle School, along with the closeout of the HVAC project. So this is just going to account for those expenditures. So looking at the sinking fund, we started with a balance of $930,000. We're adding revenues of $1,332,000, expenditures of $1,869,000, resulting in a net loss of $536,000 in the sinking fund and a proposed ending fund balance of $394,000. And I guess while I've got the podium, I'll climb up on my soapbox and I'll say, just for some of the newer board members' benefit, so the sinking fund takes in about $1.3 million a year, which does not go very far in the grand scheme of things. When you're looking at a district with over 700,000 square feet of building space. So generally, what our strategy has been is to save up a year or two of sinking fund money so we can fund some larger projects. So right now we're looking at about $394,000 in ending fund balance. So we're not going to target really anything out of the sinking fund coming up this summer. We're going to let that balance grow so that we can tackle a larger project next year. So moving on to the Capital Projects Fund. Capital Projects Fund is a standalone fund. It does not have a specific funding source. It is not funded by property taxes. So the revenue that comes into the Capital Projects Fund is revenue that we put there. We've been transferring the money into the Capital Projects Fund the last few years to cover certain things, like, for instance, $150,000 a year that we've been transferring into our Capital Projects Fund to cover what we call the one-to-one initiative, where we invest in Chromebooks for students in the district. That's been an ongoing program that we've continued funding. We've also been transferring $1 million into Capital Projects Fund to kind of be a backstop for the sinking fund. So we've identified, I believe it's about $2.7 million worth of projects that we need to tackle this next year. And the sinking fund doesn't have the capacity right now to fund those. So we're going to fund those out of the Capital Projects Fund. So we've been kind of building a backstop to the sinking fund. So anyway, I'll climb off my soapbox now and move on to the budget presentation. Thank you for your patience. So in the Capital Projects Fund, we have revenues of $2,018,800. We're showing a reduction of about $137,000 in revenue, and that's just a little bit of a cleanup. That $2 million is our transfer from the general fund, plus the reimbursement from the Shiras Foundation, Friends of the Shiras Planetarium, and the MEDC grant for the projector at Shiras Planetarium. What I didn't realize with the December amendment is the first payment from MEDC on the grant that we had slipped in right before in June of fiscal year 23-24. I thought it was in July of 24-25. So that revenue for that first grant payment was already accounted for in the previous year. So this is just kind of a little bit of timing cleanup in the revenue there. And then we are adjusting the expenses by about $145,000 for the additional expenses that the board authorized for the Shiras Planetarium project at a previous meeting. So we're just, again, cleaning up the budget for what the board has approved. So looking at Capital Projects Fund, we started at $5,709,000. We had revenues of $2,018,800, expenditures of $1,190,000, resulting in a net income of $827,945, resulting in an ending fund balance of $6,537,048. Any questions? Hearing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lampman. Appreciate the update. I'm going to use that as a segue into a facilities update. We do this generally every spring leading up to summer when the majority of our projects are underway. So I do have Isaac Roberts here from GEI to help us answer any questions on one specific facility project or infrastructure project that you will be considering tonight, and that is the Sandy Knoll Roof Project. I'm going to talk a little bit about Sandy Knoll Roof in the context of projects identified scheduled for this summer. But if you have questions about the Sandy Knoll Roof replacement, which is going to cost approximately $400,000, that bid recommendation is in your packet, please feel free to ask myself or Mr. Roberts, and we will gladly provide you more information. It's pretty standard, not a full tear down and replace, more or less the top layer, if the rubber layer, if you will, correct?
Yes.
Along with addressing a section of the gym roof that's exposed to weather and wind, and we've had some leaking, so we're gonna put some flashing essentially to address the issues we've had with leaking along that south-facing gym wall. Is that also correct? Okay. So scheduled for this summer, again, Sandy Knoll roof replacement to the tune of approximately $400,000. We still have one playground / outdoor learning space that we have not yet addressed, and that's Cherry Creek. They waited until this coming summer. They're working on some grants. That's gonna cost approximately $100,000. Shires Planetarium renovations, you've heard plenty about previously. Again, this is not all cost and maps based on what you heard from their fundraising efforts. Total cost of the project is approximately $1 million. The alternative school is gonna undergo an upgrade this summer. We're going to upgrade or renovate their college and career readiness room, which is being used currently and needs a facelift, needs some additional infrastructure improvements to make that more usable space. Along with the front door, if you will, when you come to Sandy Knoll, you may have noticed the sidewalk is in disrepair. They need some concrete work, and then we're gonna fix up their front entrance, specifically the fascia that's looking a little tired. That's gonna cost approximately $430,000. We have PA systems. You've heard me talk quite at length about PA systems, the need for communications, especially in an emergency. We did put PA systems in Cherry Creek, Superior Hills, and the alternative school. Those have been, I think, a much needed and welcomed improvement. We're gonna try to do two buildings. We're focusing on the high school, which is gonna be by far the larger expense of the two buildings since it's so much larger, but the other building is Sandy Knoll. So we have budgeted for approximately $625,000 for the high school and Sandy Knoll PA system improvements. And then also at the high school, their HVAC unit for the pod is not currently operational. So we need to get that fixed, and that's gonna cost us approximately $175,000. So what I just read to you was roughly 2.7 million. And I think it validates what Mr. Lampman was talking about in regard to the revenue and expenses that we have related to infrastructure. The sinking fund, money in, money out, 1.3 million coming in a year roughly, and then more than that going out, as you heard him allude to. Our capital projects fund, fortunately, as he mentioned, roughly 6.5 million, but you can see by some of the estimates I gave you, we are going to be tapping into that capital projects fund significantly, especially while we build the sinking fund back up. So I'm going to pause on that and provide you an opportunity to ask me questions before I move on.
That was a list. I just want to clarify real quick. The fascia, I think you just misspoke. The fascia is MAHS.
Correct.
The roof and PA is Sandy Knoll.
Correct.
Thank you.
Which school needed the concrete work? Was that the same one?
Alternative school. Alternative school is a college and career readiness room and the sidewalk fascia work. The high school, MSHS high school, excuse me, is the PA system and the pod HVAC. Thank you for that clarification. And Sandy Knoll, as you said, is the roof and the PA system.
And what was the cost for the Elk School?
The cost for the college and career readiness project and the sidewalk fascia work was roughly $430,000.
And the concrete work was just the sidewalk area out front, where the old kind of drop-off area used to be. Or was it-
Sidewalk and steps.
Okay.
Yeah, that whole front door, if you will.
That's all wrapped in with the fascia.
Correct.
For Mr. Roberts, for the Bell Roofing bid for Sandy Knoll, do you happen to recall what the cost would have been for the complete tear out and just redoing it?
You might want to use the mic, just because he won't pick up your response. While he's going up to the mic, reminder, Mr. Roberts, we had about 500 to 600,000 budgeted for that project, and we came in around.
So, the full repair was replaced.
The mic's not on.
Oh, no, there you go. The full remove and replace would have been at least double the price, if not more.
Okay. And then what is the life expectancy of the replacement as presented versus the complete tear out and redoing it?
The same complete repair, or remove and replace, and this overlay both would have came in with a 15-year warranty.
Okay, so either way, you're getting 15 years.
Yeah.
Roughly.
I'm
you.
assuming this is a rubber roof, correct?
Yes, yeah.
And what do you know the square footage?
It's roughly 500,000.
Thank you.
That's all I have, thank you.
Okay, hearing no
Thank
other
you.
questions. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Again, that bid recommendation is in your packet, and you will be considering that project later on in the agenda. So moving on, I guess I'll call that part one, the short-term need, and then part two, the long-term need. I know we've heard the $100 million reference being floated around in our community, and that's not trivial. That 100 million is a result of much work. Mr. Roberts and his team, along with IDI and their consultants, have been working with MAPS administration on facility, asset management, audit plans, and we've been consulting with various groups. We recently participated in a statewide infrastructure study and have a pretty decent handle on our infrastructure needs. So what I intend to do is just briefly summarize that 100 million. I can certainly provide more information to the board if you so desire. So first and foremost, that $100 million need covers all buildings, 4 elementary buildings, our middle school, our 2 high schools, along with our athletics complex and our bus garage. Cost categories, general categories, remodeling throughout, classrooms, hallways, bathrooms, etc., instructional technology, safety, athletics, the arts, academics, minimal new construction that we've identified. We did identify a potential new construction at Bothwell to address the second floor, which is in significant need of updating. And then also our press box at the high school at their athletic complex is a project we've identified that would require new construction. Some demolition. An example would be the chimney at Graverette that's no longer being used and no longer needed. So that would require some demolition. I'd also like to talk about a little bit of a bit of a breakdown for each building, just to give you an idea of what those projects might look like, the projects that we've identified. Start with Cherry Creek, one of our 2 newest buildings, Cherry Creek and Superior Hills, so those will be similar. Exterior door replacements, roughly 38 doors. Classroom upgrades, that includes furniture, casework, flooring, ceiling, etc. Additional security cameras, window treatments, those are safety-related projects. Gym improvements, definitely the floor, library improvements. LED lighting upgrades throughout the building, boilers, which are dated, our HVAC system, etc. Also would like to, again, address the outdoor learning spaces or playgrounds. Graverette, Just major projects, I'm not gonna hit everything. Chimney removal, I mentioned that already. Repurpose the basement, or at least renovate that space so it's more usable. Gym floor replacement, classroom renovations, flooring, ceiling, furniture, etc. Restroom renovations, make them barrier-free, more modernized. Interior door replacements, auditorium upgrades, and there's a few needed upgrades in the auditorium. Univents, otherwise known as unit ventilator replacements throughout the building, lighting and electrical upgrades throughout the building, and HVAC in the building and the auditorium. Sandy Knoll, their gymnasium is in need of improvements, significant improvements, along with the upper elementary restrooms in the gymnasium, the floor, the stage, the locker rooms, etc. Classroom renovations, which is going to be consistent throughout all the buildings, ceiling, flooring, in some cases, ceiling mounted projectors, electrical, etc. Interior door replacements, library renovations, bathroom upgrades, both in the classroom and common areas, roof replacement, which you heard a little bit about tonight, classroom sink replacements, lighting, electrical upgrades, univents in all of our classrooms, electrical upgrades, HVAC, etc. Superior Hills, again, much like Cherry Creek, exterior door replacements, classroom upgrades, additional security cameras, window treatments, etc. The gym and the library need improvements, LED upgrades throughout, boilers, HVAC, etc., and fire alarm system needs to be updated. Bothwell Middle School, classroom reconfigurations, extensive second floor renovations, and the possible addition to make that possible. Bathroom modernizations, exterior facade upgrades, window treatments, door lock upgrades, hallway and gym locker room replacements, elevator modernization. We all know how much that costs after our experience at Grave Rat. Band and music renovations, our college and our CTE wing renovation, CTE wing being renovated, boiler replacements, and electrical upgrades throughout the building. At the alternative school, I mentioned the career and college readiness renovations, the gym floor and the stage need to be replaced. We mentioned fascia. We also need to replace the roof at some point in the near future. Interior door replacements, window replacements, restroom renovations, classroom renovations, HVAC, electrical upgrades throughout. Marquette Senior High School, classroom upgrades. I won't repeat myself, but everything I mentioned before, plus door hardware and sinks were appropriate. Renovations to their CTE trades wing, their art room, their music rooms, their media center, their cafeteria, restroom modernizations, exterior facade improvements, exterior door replacements, window replacements, locker replacements both in the corridor and the locker rooms, fire sprinkler heads. The pool area needs significant renovations along with their locker and shower room, new univents and waste piping replacements, elevator modernization, roof replacements, and then HVAC electrical throughout. The athletics, specifically, I mentioned a little bit already, but again, the locker rooms, the gym floors, sound system, we need a new press box, and in an ideal world, another facility for spring sports and other athletic activities when weather is not conducive, otherwise known as a practice facility. At the bus garage, HVAC, electrical, lighting, fire alarm, roof replacement, general renovations across the building, etc. And I don't say that to be sensationalize this infrastructure need, but what I want to give is some context, some more specificity to the 100 million that we've heard floated. It is real, and it is greater. The need is greater than what we're going to see in our sinking fund revenue and the money that we have saved in capital projects. We've done the best we can with what we have, and I think we've done a really nice job. We've made significant improvements. $2.7 million this summer. We've been $2 million or more the last few summers, at least since I've taken over. So we've made significant upgrades, and I think you've seen those upgrades, and we've done our best to cover a lot of different areas. But as Mr. Lampman said, with over 750,000 square feet of buildings, with our newest buildings being 30 years old roughly, there's just significant need. And I wanted to give the board a realistic taste of I guess, how infrastructure is going to be a focus for myself and this administration moving forward, and hopefully for the board as well. So with that, I'll first ask or offer an opportunity to ask more questions, but I think perhaps pass it over to Ms. Cambenzi if you once we run through those questions.
Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Yeah. Where to begin? You know, we throw out 100 million. I mean, is that sort of the dream number, or is that a realistic number? Is it, you know, sustaining things, getting them to the place where we walk in and we're like, wow, this is great?
Yes. I don't know that it would be a dream come true, but it would be an update to our facilities, modernizing our facilities and addressing the myriad needs that we've identified over the years related to infrastructure. Again, with buildings that are a minimum of 30 years old, any of you that are homeowners, 30 years is a long time to go before updating your home.
Well, we
Pretty
know
much any
something
aspect,
would be
so,
new.
yeah.
So, I mean, and ideally,
Yeah.
you know, you walk into a new school, which I have, and you're like, wow,
Yeah,
this is where a child, you know, is going to thrive. And I mean, you love the hominess of something old, but at some point things are wearing down on every facility we have. So kind of what we've been ticking away at each summer is, you know, in each year, was that kind of part of this whole grand picture?
yeah, you probably heard a little bit of redundancy when I listed off the projects that we have slated for this summer, and then the $100 million. We're doing our best to address that greater need. We prioritize. It's not just the 100 million that we cover every time. We've taken that and boiled it down to a shorter term list which are prioritized items that we need to address, and with the budget, doing the best we can to to knock off as many projects as we can.
And when things go over, like an elevator.
Yes, when things go over, which they have very regularly, that's where we use the capital projects as a backstop to the sinking fund.
I mean, we've been kind of doing a Band-Aid approach to a lot of the stuff, but, you know, eventually it's gonna come a time where the Band-Aid just isn't gonna stop the flow.
Yeah, it sounds, in that overview, there was a mixture of, I mean, so much of it was necessity, so I don't want to downplay the need when you talk about the idea of the dream. But when you're talking about barrier-free bathrooms and windows, it's hard to even put that under the dream category. Some of those are matters of loss, a lot of those are matters of safety, and with all that we have to be proud of in our district and as many accolades as we get as the biggest district in the Upper Peninsula and the great work we're doing, our facilities do not match our education, frankly. And anybody you referred to maintaining a home and with the upgrades you have to do in 30 years, many of us who live in older homes or have chosen to renovate intentionally older homes know that while that looks like cost savings in the beginning, oftentimes when you're retrofitting things, you're actually having to spend more. So you're doing that balance of, scorched earth versus Band-Aids versus, best practice from a construction point of view. So thank you for that.
Yeah, our buildings, I do want to say our buildings are solid,
Yeah.
solidly built, just not updated. New
Yes.
construction is cost prohibitive, especially with 7 buildings, not including the bus garage and the athletic complex. New buildings are just simply cost prohibitive, and I think at this point the community's made it clear that they want us to use what we have, and I think we've done a really nice job taking the money that's available, the resources that are available, and doing the best we can to provide those updates. And the updates are significant and I think remarkable in many ways, what we've been able to do with limited resources. But again, $100 million need with $1.3 million of revenue a year. It doesn't take an engineer or a mathematician or even somebody that knows construction well to understand that that's just not sustainable.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, I think my takeaway from what you're saying is so much of this is not even, so much of what was listed is not a dream, it's a necessity.
Right.
We just have to do things.
Well, just two more comments. One is, I mean, when you're looking at it from an environmental perspective, I've done enough construction and rehab and new construction that which one's more kind of eco-friendly, and pros and cons to both. So when we have buildings that have great structure, are in great locations, logically, for me, it's to, redo those as best we can, but I don't want us to, I guess I'm concerned at throwing out a number that's 100 million that is a massive number for our community to even wrap our heads around, when I don't even think that's gonna give us our dream. And I don't wanna sell ourselves short. So what is the dream? What's realistic? And what's essential? And how are we gonna pay for it? I mean, those obviously are the pieces that we need to be addressing. And we've been sort of kind of bringing it to the table and talking about it and doing our Band-Aids for what's in critical need and prioritizing. And I think we've done a phenomenal job. I think you all have done a great job. And I think, working with both DEI and IDI, that it's been a great relationship and really done a great job. And the fact that you've even had the foresight to put this entire list together, I'm trying to wrap my head around how we look at the dream. I mean, because obviously as a community, we have to vision what it is we want. What is our dream for our schools, and how do we get there? That might mean that there are steps to get there.
Right,
Just thoughts.
I think everything, the 100 million is cost prohibitive when you think about generating that kind of revenue. At the board's discretion or directive, I would be happy to explore different ways of addressing the infrastructure need and come up with some potential cost to our community, and would want to, if possible, have that be done on public record, just so it's known that we're exploring those options.
Well, even if we had 100 million, it wouldn't all be, it has to be phased in and over time, because obviously we have schools happening in these buildings. So, I mean, we need to definitely, I think, make a motion for that, because we need to be looking at this not just as we've been doing for the past 4 years that I've been on the board, which again has been, I think we've done that well, and you all have. But it's time that we kind of approach things differently, because they're gonna get more and more dilapidated. And we've even received emails about that, so.
Would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I think so. I'd like to make a motion for the superintendent to gather information. You already have, but paths forward for us to, have further discussion, and how we, address this $100 million facility analysis that we have. And how do we do a plan over the next how many ever years it's going to take to address these issues. So, is that too wordy? Yes. Sorry. I make a motion for the superintendent to gather information and paths forward for us to address this $100 million facility analysis.
Do I have support?
Support.
Okay, so we have motion and support. Do we have any further discussion or any discussion regarding the motion? So it would just be to instruct the superintendent to explore some options to close the facility gap.
Well, when you ask options, I mean, what specifically are we asking Mr. Civic to look into? It's kind of a broad term to send him off marching orders for a motion. So specifically, what are we asking him to look into?
For him to look at paths forward for addressing this and funding it, and for him to come back with, I mean, I don't think we want to make it very specific, that's for him to look at, but, you know, what do we need essentially, whether it's over a 10-year period of time, or, I mean, at some point, we have to start putting a plan together, and I think like, basically that, is starting to get a plan for how we address this issue.
So is the question on how to raise approximately $100 million, or is the question about an actual construction plan? That's the only thing that.
I think they go together.
I'm sorry, I can hear both.
My question, is my mic on?
Yes.
Okay. My question for clarity was, are we asking for him to come up with a plan forward for the generation of approximately $100 million for construction? Or are we asking him to create an itemized plan and phasing of all needed upgrades and their prices? Because one is fundraising and one is construction based, at least from what I'm hearing. I'm just looking for a little clarity on the motion.
Both of those, I mean, what are the priorities and how do, is there a way of, maybe it's not 100 million, maybe it's less than that, but what are the priorities and, what would be a plan for implementing that? And then yes, funding it goes with that.
Like I mentioned before, some of these projects we're targeting with our short-term plans year to year, using sinking fund revenue and capital projects revenue. The projects I listed for this summer were included on that list. I think I could, with the team, prioritize the $100 million list and get that down to a number that is maybe more manageable. But again, the funding sources are pretty limited for public schools. So what that looks like, we would have to approach some outside consultants to look at how to generate that type of revenue and what would that look like for our school district and community.
So again, I'm still kind of clear on exactly what the motion is asking for. We've had a couple of different conversations. So are we focusing on what the funding mechanism is for the improvements? Are we asking for directions on the priorities of different construction projects that are needed? Is that all in one motion, or are we going to look at?
Linda, can you read that back to us?
Sure. The motion is for the superintendent to gather information on paths forward on how to address the $100 million facility analysis.
Would it be prudent to drop the amount and just say the facilities analysis,
I mean, I'm okay with however you want to approach this, but for me, they go hand in hand. I mean, and that 100 million can come back lower, or, how do we prioritize things, and what would be I don't want to give specifics here, but to put together a facility plan and ideas for how we fund it. I mean, I kind of kept it open for that reason. I mean, do you need it more specific then?
I can work from that. We have, again, 2 A&E firms, architectural engineering firms that we work with. We have firms that help us with financing, and I think I could, in a fairly reasonable amount of time, turn this around with a more specific, not proposal, but options for how to address the infrastructure need in the district. And perhaps we don't necessarily reference the 100 million. That's just the term or the frame of reference because I've heard that talked about in our community, even in our last election. And I've used that term because that was the result of our audit and our analysis. So that has been, I guess, become more widely known, and I wanted to use that as context to frame this discussion, but it doesn't necessarily have to be part of my next steps for planning. I can just keep it more broad as far as developing plans and options for addressing the infrastructure needs at Marquette Area Public Schools.
And this would just be more or less a fact finding. It wouldn't be, we wouldn't be taking any actions or anything like that regarding this. We would just give the superintendent some direction to explore some of the different options and bring it back to the board for us to have a future discussion about.
So options, again, just, are we looking at more of an itemized list of, I mean, there was quite a list that was read off of different projects, and so are we looking to get specifics on construction costs per project or an itemized list of what those projects look like? Are we diving into funding mechanisms at this point? Grants, villages, I mean, is that what we're looking at this point?
I think that's what we're looking at, just trying to figure out what type of projects we have, what needs to be done, prioritized, and then how we're gonna fund it. I mean, we know that $1.3 million per year in the sinking fund is not gonna cover $100 million in projects, unless we wanna wait 100 years.
So one, district priorities, two, funding mechanisms, and then potentially tiers of need.
Yeah, I mean, and even if, like, let's say we magically got $100 million, we're not gonna be able to do $100 million worth of projects in a year. It's gonna have to be over a period of time because we can't just shut down the district and, well, I mean, kids might like that, but for a day and then they'll be bored. So we have to have, some kind of a plan going forward.
Mr. Roberts, can we do 100 million in a year? Okay, I just want to make sure that.
So this is just to
if we could
give
have a
some
motion,
direction.
Correct. I just want to make sure we have a clear direction from Mr. Sedgwick, specifically the one looking at district priorities plus cost of project, two, funding mechanisms, and three, tiers of need, specifically referencing the project's funding layers, meaning, at bare minimum, do we have X amount of funding that we need to have addressed, A level, B level, C level? I mean, does that sound good to everybody, or is that clear?
No, I agree. Do you feel like that's clear? I mean, do you feel?
Yes, and I would be leveraging the help of some experts because
Sure.
what you're alluding to is complex.
Sure.
And I know who those people are, and so does Mr. Lampman. I just want to make sure that we have full transparency here, that we're going to approach on exploring those different options and what that could look like.
And including in funding mechanisms, I know, of course, millage is a part of that, but I'm hoping that we're considering and exploring and exhausting grant opportunities, both state and federally as well. Foundational opportunities.
Yeah, that is correct, and I think you saw some of that even in our report today. Some of the projects we've identified were paid for with grants, like the safety upgrades, PA systems, cameras. Those were paid for with grant dollars from the state. Similarly, with the Shires Planetarium, there was an MEDC grant for $250,000 that went towards that project. We have the sinking fund, of course. We have some local fundraising that's occurred with some of those projects, and then the capital projects. So we've hit a lot of different areas as far as funding sources in our short-term plan. But again, those are all short-term plans. It doesn't necessarily address the larger scale of the need. And I will say Michigan is somewhat unique, and we don't get funding for infrastructure in public schools in Michigan, and that really limits our ability to generate the revenue that we're talking about. We have addressed that with our lawmakers, by the way.
Okay.
So do we have any?
Motion again. Lisa's motion.
So the motion is a motion for the superintendent to gather information on paths forward on how to address the 100 million facility analysis.
Got a second?
Yep, we have
Just need to vote on it.
motion and support. Are there any further comments? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Cedric, do you have anything else?
Would you like me to have anything else?
No.
Then no.
All right, moving on. Approving the first consent agenda, which includes the minutes of the special meeting of February 10th, 2025, the closed minutes of special meeting of February 10th, 2025, minutes of the regular meeting of February 17th, 2025. So I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support. Okay, motion made by Mrs. Clip, Ms. Wright. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Approving the second consent agenda, which includes the personnel report dated March 2025 and the financial reports of February 2025. So I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Well, we need to, okay. So, Mr. Smith made the motion
Second.
and Mrs. Clip made the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Student School Board Representatives Report.
Thank you. So right now in the school, we have a lot of things going on, but most importantly for our juniors, they're getting ready for the SAT, which they'll take right after spring break, which is also coming up, which we're really looking forward to. In our arts department, the band and orchestra had one ensemble last weekend, and it sounded like it went very well for them, so that was really good. We had to play The Wizard of Oz, and that wasn't through the MSHS organization, but a lot of our students participated in it, and I went and watched it. It was really good, so that was pretty cool to see. Our winter sports have concluded, and just some a little update of how that went. The boys ski team won the state championship, so that was really cool. They were down at Boyne Mountain, along with the cross country ski teams. They boys and girls won the state championship. Our swim and dive team won the UP championship. Our boys basketball team, they lost in the regional finals, but they had a very successful season. Along with our girls basketball team, they lost in the district finals. Our hockey team ended their season with a quarterfinals loss, a state quarterfinals loss, and I think that was it. And then some spring sports we have starting up right now are track, baseball, softball, girls soccer, and tennis. So those will get under full way pretty soon. In the student council world, we just put on the twerp dance a few weekends ago, and it was really, really successful. I don't know if anyone saw the gym, but it looked really good in my opinion, and we had a lot of student involvement, so it was great. And then some things we're looking to do right now is set up a powder puff volleyball for the boys, so it'll be like what the girls do in the fall for football, but it'll be the boys for volleyball, and that'll just give the students something to look forward to after spring break. That's all.
That's great, thank you. Comments from the public, looks like we have one. Lisa McBride.
Like I sat on the wrong side.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. Do I need to state anything? Because you already have it, right, okay. So I have a couple questions that I'm going to start off with. And I do have proof of these questions, what the answers are. I said, well, I have proof of the questions and other things I'm going to address. This is on the topic that this school and administration can't escape, which seems to be fraud and corruption. So the first couple questions. Is it this school's administration's policy to criticize parents on unemployment? Is it the school's policy that a student's tumors are made up to cause harm and distress even after 10 years of surgeries? Or that the tumors that a student had are Munchausen by proxy? These three questions I just posed were things stated by a staff member here, Millie White. I have proof of the things that nobody asked me about 2 years ago. So I don't think there was any investigation done. Because do you know the policies that does seem to, the policies that this affects? These multiple huge things that were stated by the staff member about a student's tumors being made up to cause, that the parent made it up to cause harm and distress, and that it was Munchausen by proxy, and criticizing a parent on unemployment, all of these major things said by the staff member are actually violations of the current policy, the updated revised policy 4202B, number 3 and 5, and the old policy of 2 years ago, 1613E. So again, this is policy violations, but yet the staff member is still working here. And these kinds of accusations and blame are still being done currently in 2025. 2 years ago, Millie White began the relentless overstepping pursuit of deeming daughter homeless, even though CPS never did. She repeatedly lied to her own employer about involvement and criticized the hell out of her work and employer. I have proof with me today. I have it 2 years ago. Millie White didn't care and called in favors, including Mary Beth Mellon, who was also talked to by CPS. CPS talked to Millie White and dismissed Millie White's numerous claims, and CPS saw that Millie White was influencing the student, my daughter. The counselor spun such 360-degree stories, having daughter erase 17 years, disowning the American flag because my favorite color, my own favorite color, is one of the 3 colors on our flag, and committing Mary Beth Mellon, who recently left this school to go elsewhere, but Mary Beth Mellon also committed fraud with Marquette Health Department by giving students DHS caregiver grant funds that did not apply to the student, with the help of another coworker at Marquette Health Department with the initials of TM. And this school should do their investigations, because I shouldn't have to provide all the proof. But I have it regarding this health department caregiver grant that was a DHS caregiver grant. Counselor Mellon never fact-checked crap, and something going on since 24, which is just last year. That is 2,000% not me, but can be traced back to Millie White. And all of this has intentionally destroyed and alienated family relationships. You continue to employ staff who repeatedly violate 4202B, number 3 and 5, even in 25, old policy 1613E. Even though Mary Beth Mellon jumped ship, the school can still be held accountable. What good are revised policies when librarians can hide behind phones and computers, lying and coercing students? Again, CPS saw the coercion and the influence. And spinning stories so different that daughter is worse than 2 years ago because she also still walks these halls of the school that didn't let her graduate.
Thank you. Moving on to new business. Consider awarding the Sandy Knoll Elementary School roof replacement project to Bell Roofing Company as recommended.
Make a motion to award the Sandy Knoll Elementary School roof replacement project to Bell Roofing as recommended.
Support.
Motion made by Mr. Zedunick, support by Mr. Smith. Any comments or questions? Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to approve purchase of food service equipment from Strike Equipment as recommended.
Make a motion to approve the purchase of the food service equipment from Strike Equipment as presented.
Support.
Motion made by Mr. Zedunick, support by Mrs. Maddox Smith. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Consider approval of the March 3rd, 2025 Truen policy update, which I believe is in your packet. Mrs. Hopper, do you have any further for that before we?
It really is pretty self-explanatory. Truen is doing it because of the change in law. We are actually intentionally leaving blank policy 4305 and replacing it with policy 4113. And it reflects the amendment to the ESTA.
So I would consider approval of the March 3rd, 2025 Truen policy update.
Make a motion to approve the March 3rd, 2025 Truen policy update as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Zedunick, support by Mrs. Cliff. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Consider amendment to the 2024-2025 budget. So I'd entertain a motion to approve the amendment or to accept the amendment for the 2024-2025 budget.
I'll make a motion to approve the amendment to the 2024-2025 budget as presented this evening.
Support. Okay, motion made by Mrs. Clip, support by Ms. Ray. Any comments or questions? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to board member comments. Mr. Smith, your first board member comments.
Thank you. And thank you to the board for the opportunity to work with you on what are shaping up to be some really important projects. I'm really happy to see the board tackling our infrastructure in our buildings. The consequences of not doing that, I think, pose significant risk for the district in that our facilities will just continue to deteriorate. So doing nothing isn't really an option. And I think a lot of good things are to come by having the discussions. And along with those discussions, it's more than just about buildings. I think along with that, we're probably going to hear how it's going to impact instruction. And that's a critical component of what we're doing with our facility. So thank you to Mr. Sedgwick for being so deliberate in outlining where some of these needs are. And also, there's a lot of work ahead in coming up with a plan, but I think this group and the administration is up for the task. So I appreciate that.
Ms. Thomas.
Welcome, Mr. Smith. Thank you to our student representative. Thank you to Mr. Sedgwick, Mr. Lampman for the budget outlines and our projects that we have coming up. I agree with Mr. Smith. There clearly is a long list of things to be done, but it's exciting. We have lots of new projects that we get to look forward to and work on, and update these buildings. And looking forward to it. I think it'll be fun.
Mrs. Maddox Smith?
Thanks, everybody, for showing up. Welcome, Mr. Smith. Looking forward to working with you. This was a big meeting. Thank you, Mr. Lampman, for the budget breakdown and filling that hour. We appreciate that. To all hard work from Zach Sedgwick put into explaining the facilities to us and what we have going on. It's daunting, what needs to be done, but it needs to be done, and it's hard work, and I look forward to continuing that work with this board. Thank you.
Mrs. Clip?
Well, first of all, before I decided to marry a German, I was a McCarthy, so happy St. Patrick's Day. I hope everybody goes home and eats some soda bread. Mr. Smith, thank you to our student rep who Caleb always does a great job. Thank you to our central office. You guys always do a great job providing clarity in some really complex issues. That's too trite of a word. Lots of information this evening, sort of something to sit on and marinate with over the next 48 hours or so. But you do it with such intentionality and thoughtfulness that I want you to know that I see the work and I recognize that it's a lot of it. So exciting. This is a community of legacy. I've heard this time and time again in my time on the board. We're a community that values tradition and legacy. And when we look at infrastructure needs and building issues, we really are talking about legacies. Classes come and go. These are the things that remain, and they do, in fact, speaking firsthand after being in 3 different districts, I can tell you how facilities impact student achievement, student performance, student well-being. And so I hope that we don't ever forget that those things are integrated into best practice for all of our kids. I'm excited. It's going to be a lot of work, and it's going to require a lot of critical thinking, a lot of questions, but we are up for it, and our community deserves it, and of course, as always, mostly our students deserve it. So thanks to all. Your work is appreciated.
Mr. Zudin?
No additional comment, thank you.
Ms. Ray?
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you all. I don't want to reiterate what everyone's already said. I just want to emphasize the fact that having this information already being presented to us and already being addressed, every year we're hearing about the priorities and the needs, shows the attention to detail that is needed for all of these facilities, particularly with how much they are aging. I just want to emphasize that I've walked into inner city schools, suburb schools, private schools, and the environment that a child walks into is just like we know the home environment. All of that is so important. And to be in a place that feels loving, welcoming, well tended to, it helps children learn, and that's what we're all about. So for me, I want to look towards our community, embracing our schools and supporting them, and also not just helping get us to that sustainability, but I do want to emphasize the dream. Where do we see our schools maybe not in this round, but maybe in 2 or 3 rounds, and really looking at a vision long-term, because I think our kids deserve that. Thank you.
Thank you. Board President comments, just echoing what everyone else said. Welcome, Mr. Smith. Thank you, Caleb, for your report. It's always good to hear what the students are up to. Announcements and other meetings. March 18th, 2025, which is tomorrow, board retreat at the Landmark Inn. March 18th, also a spotlight on the arts in the MSHS gym at 7 p.m. March 24th through the 28th, spring break. Woohoo! April 7th, Committee of the Whole here in the library at 5:30. April 18th, Good Friday holiday, no school. April 21st, 2025, board meeting regular at 5:30 at the Alt. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we got motion by Mr. Zdenek, support by Ms. Ray. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, Ms. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Ms. Ray opposes. All right.
It's always for Glenn.
For Glenn. All right. Motion, meeting adjourned. Thank you.